Maybe a couple more words to my person. As mentioned earlier, I've been working in software performance, I would say, for the last... Actually, I started in 1999 with a company called Zico Software. We built performance testing tools. My first job was a performance tester on a testing tool, on a load testing tool, actually. So that was kind of interesting. And I loved performance testing and performance engineering, and I stayed in that industry. So I stayed with them for 8 years, and for the last 10 years now, I'm doing Dynatrace because I was getting bored of breaking apps because it became very easy to break apps. I remember my first engagement abroad, so I'm from Austria, and my first engagement abroad was in Germany, which was just like 2 hours away, but it was like moving to a different country. And I was supposed to run a 10,000 virtual user test, so simulating 10,000 virtual users for the new unemployment, claiming unemployment money. Their office, they have a new software, and unfortunately my engagement took 10 minutes. Because after 10 minutes, and we simulated 5 users and not 10,000, the system broke. It was a Java-based application and everything. Well, they basically missed the basic things when it comes to architecture. Over the years, I tested larger applications with more users, and they could actually sustain the load, at least most of them. But then I got bored, and I said I want to jump on the other side of the fence, actually working for a company that tries to not only run load, but actually analyze why are applications breaking? Why are they slow? And I followed the call of my former CTO, Bernd Greifenader, who founded Dynatrace, and he said, I want to build something that in the beginning when we started, and you said it, we started in 2006, he actually hired 2 students from the local university in Linz, Austria, and he said, I want to build something that is using Java instrumentation. So back in the days, it was the JVM PI interface. Now we're using the JVM TI interface, the tooling interface, to actually get into the JVM. And when the JVM starts up and loads code, then we actually instrument bytecode on the fly. And obviously this is no longer a new approach. Most tools are doing this in these days. But back then I believe we were one of the first ones that did this. And it was really cool doing this for many, many years. What you see here is one of the topics that I've tried to promote over the last couple of years, DevOps. And I'm sure DevOps is a term, and I call it the most abused marketing term in the last couple of years. I remember my first time when I was asked by our marketing team to go on stage at a meetup and talk about DevOps, and I had NFC, which translates to no fucking clue. I used this term because my wife came up with it, because she has NFC, and I also sometimes I have NFC in my work. And back in the days I had NFC, and I was actually getting on stage at the DevOps meetup in Boston. And before I could open my mouth, the first guy in the row, like you, pointed a finger at me and he said, because of people like you, he didn't mean me literally, but companies that I presented, and he said like, you and the AppDynamics and New Relic and IBM and all these companies, you're just using DevOps as a term to sell your products and services, but you don't really understand what DevOps really means. And there was actually very interesting feedback for me, and I think it was one of my worst presentations I gave, because I was kind of impacted by that initial feedback. But then I thought about what does it really mean, and then I looked back at what we actually did as a company. I have been with the company for 10 years, and we moved through a big transformation. I will cover parts of it because most of our systems is actually built on Java. So I want to show you some details on how we changed our development process. But in my work in the last couple of years, I got invited to speak at different conferences, also talk with a lot of people, and I have some examples on how other companies think about DevOps and what they do. And that's what I try to kind of explain today, right? Some of the concepts. Before I get started, quick question. Who came here because of the term DevOps though? Who thought this is something interesting? Okay, cool. Who of you has tried to explain DevOps to somebody that is, okay, successfully? Who has successfully explained DevOps to somebody that has never heard the term before? All right, good. So here's my problem. I had the same issue, right? Trying to explain something that means so many things and actually for a lot of people nothing. So I thought I have to figure out how can I explain DevOps to somebody that has no concept at all of what it is. And so I actually started with figuring out how can I explain it to somebody that is non-technical, and I picked this couple, my parents. Right? So my parents are non-technical, and typically when I come home to Austria, visit 2 or 3 times a year, we sit down on a dinner table and they ask me how is work, what do they do, what do I do, and then I explain it to them, and next day, when I hear them retelling what I'm doing to somebody else, the only thing that comes out is he's fixing computers, right? Because they understand performance and blah, 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 fast and making the internet faster, and that's it. And I said, how can I explain to them what I'm really doing and what we're doing in our industry? So I came up with an analogy. And the analogy was actually inspired by my wife, because she came up with this when we were running in Boston on the Charles. And the story goes like this. So I tell my parents, remember back in the days when I was still living in Austria, I was a teenager, and we went on a family trip. You know, we I don't know, went to Italy or some other places, and we had the Kodak camera in our pocket, right? I hope most of you still remember these, right? There's not, sometimes when I talk in front of the cool new hip crowd that are like in their 20s, they have no concept anymore what this actually meant back then, right? So I explained to them, we went on the trip, we started taking pictures, and if the film roll wasn't full, what did we do? We didn't just take random pictures, we took the camera with the half full film roll back home, and weeks and months later we went on the next trip to find the other pictures, to make the whole film roll full of cool pictures. And that's the same thing that happens, I think, or used to happen in software engineering. We put 24 or 36, whatever, how many films went on that roll into a box. Classical waterfall development. I call it 24 features in a box. When we were done, we gave it to a company that actually knew what to do with it, developed the film. I'm sure they had some people in the dark room doing quality control, and the guy said, this looks like a really cool picture, it's the best thing I could do. From my perspective, it's perfect. So I ship it back to the customer. That means weeks and months later, we finally get the product, and I'm sure you remember the days when we were anticipating. And I at least remember, sometimes you were scratching your head before you open it, what I'm actually going to expect. I don't even remember all the stuff that I did in, right? Which features did we put in? And sometimes we were really frustrated. Because then you figured out that somebody actually photobombed your family reunion picture on that beach. Unfortunately, the beach is hundreds of thousands of kilometers or miles away, and it's very hard to redo that picture, which leads to frustration, right? And my analogy is with waterfall development, 6 months, a year release cycles, we push something out and then people say, well, first of all, it's too late, not what I expected, and I don't need it anymore, and I went with your competition. It's the same situation we had in our market when our new competition came up, and they were just much faster, right? They were cranking out features much faster than we could, even though we always believed we did it much better. So the new way, this is the old way, the new way, we take pictures, and now my analogy from waterfall to continuous delivery in DevOps is, this is the way my wife takes pictures these days, and I'm sure you all do as well. So this is a picture I took her, so you already said, we're moving back to Austria next year, but 2 years ago, I actually brought her on a trip to Austria to show her how beautiful my country is. So we were hiking in the Alpine lakes. So when my wife, Gabi, back in the days, she was my girlfriend, but when she takes pictures, she takes a picture at a time and immediately sees how the picture is going to look like, because thanks to Apple, in her case, right, she immediately gets feedback, that's cool. But even better, Apple was so smart, and also Google with their Android and Microsoft, they said, we want to build something into that tool that we give our end users for them to become even better photographers. So they put stuff in there to make the pictures better, putting filters on it, getting rid of something that is not nice. And now all the cool new stuff where you can annotate and whatever you draw on it. So, but my wife, she takes a picture, she can optimize it on the phone until she believes it's good enough. She's still on that phone, and then she clicks a button and deploys it into production. Her production environment is Instagram and Facebook. And the feedback that she wants is the likes of her dad, who still lives in Colombia, and all the friends and family around the world. If she gets dislikes, maybe somebody disapproves from the stuff that she posted, maybe she takes it off, but she's under control. She's in full control of the complete delivery pipeline, including production. If she gets likes, she's happy. If she gets a comment from her dad saying, looks cool, but can you take another picture with Andy? then the dad doesn't need to wait 6 months. He needs to wait maybe a minute because she can take another picture with me in there and running it through the complete automated pipeline. And that is, for me, continuous delivery with feedback loops. And the example that I wanted to bring here is something that my parents understand, obviously, right? Because they now also use their mobile phones to take pictures and post something on Facebook. But I think the magic is that somebody figured out how to provide an automated, very easy to use pipeline that provides tooling to make the stuff that we are trying to do just even better, right? With the filters and the deployment. That's what I believe we try to do also with DevOps from a tooling perspective. Coming up with some automated pipeline that every developer can use to push their code through. But the second change, what DevOps is for me, is the cultural shift and I believe the responsibility. In my case, my wife, she's end-to-end responsible. She decides which picture to take, how much she optimizes it before she deploys it, and what to do with the feedback in production. And that's also what we, for instance, at Dynatrace do. We put our developers into the driver's seat of their features. They need to figure out what to develop, when to release it, and what to do when something breaks in production. They're responsible for production as well. And we have a dedicated team that is responsible for the pipeline and the orchestration engine that deploys their changes into the different environments. We used to call it the DevOps team. Now they say, well, it's actually not really, I mean, they're more like a product team. The product is the pipeline, but that's kind of what it is. So does this make sense? Right? So the difference between waterfall and small iterations, but also the mental shift between, we used to have dev, test, and ops. And I believe DevOps means we have shared responsibility end-to-end. All right, so I'm really fortunate in my role that I can travel the world and I speak with people, and I want to give you some technical and process tips of stuff that I learned, especially this year. In February this year, I spent a week in New Zealand. I was invited for a performance engineering workshop where a couple of people were invited. Goranka, she was also invited. She's from Facebook. She's one of the key performance engineers at Facebook. She's responsible, as you can imagine, not for one server, but for tens of thousands of servers. And she actually gave me some insight in how engineering works at Facebook and what DevOps means. And I have a couple of things I wanna talk about. Obviously, I don't need to explain what DevOps, what Facebook is. It's not only the social network, but they also have WhatsApp and the Messenger and all that stuff. So the first thing that she told me, if you start as an engineer at Facebook, any type of engineer, you go through a 6 to 8 week boot camp. Right? And in her case, she wanted to become she's a performance expert. She hated PHP, but she was exactly for that reason put on a PHP project to learn, actually to experience what it is to be pushed out of your comfort zone, first of all, to learn something new, because if we only pick all the time what we are comfortable with, the learning curve is very small, as if in case we learn something new. So every engineer is put on a project where you're assigned to a certain software feature, and you have to actually analyze and fix production problems, and then learn how the development process works, and also deploy changes as fast as possible, and then being responsible for that. So learning how it works, learning a new language, learning different teams. So that's, I think, a pretty cool thing. But the most important thing is being pushed out of your comfort zone. The next thing that I thought was really interesting, the way Facebook deals with new feature ideas. And I thought the whole concept of releasing first and optimize second was totally contrary to what I always thought about quality. I've been starting my engineering career as a quality engineer. I was a tester. For me, the quality was the biggest thing. In their case, it's different, and here's the reason why. They say within Facebook, they have a lot of people that come up with great ideas, right? All these product managers, business analysts. But as with every company, about 80% of features are total crap. Or, let's say it that way, are not seen as cool by the real end users as the people that come up with the ideas. Right? I've been a product manager myself for a while, and I thought these are the best features, and then 2 out of 10 maybe were used, and the other 8 never were really, even though I thought they were pretty cool. So for that reason, they say, when our people come up with new ideas, we want to release them as fast as possible, figure out what is the success criteria. That means if we deploy a feature, we measure how fast people are using that feature. And if, for instance, if within the first 3 months, not more than 5% of the user base are using this feature at least once a week, then it's not a successful feature, then we throw it out. So that means they're getting rid of 80% of the waste, and then taking the 20% of the features that are actually accepted by the end users, and then they optimize it. And that's a much better approach than building the perfect quality feature that nobody needs. Right? And what's also interesting, so the fix-it ticket here, so in case the feature is kind of reaching, is good enough from end users accepted, then they basically get a so-called fix-it ticket. She explained it to me, and I'm not from the US, but I think when you get pulled over by a cop because you have like a broken light, you don't immediately have to pay, but you get like time to fix it. The same with them. So you get a particular time, and you get dedicated resources, people that actually help you to bring this feature to the right quality, the right performance, the right resource consumption, okay? So I thought that's pretty cool. Another thing she told me about, and this is also not something that only Facebook is doing, but many large companies in the world, when they come up with new features, they are not deploying it to the whole world, all at once. They are deploying it to a small test environment. They're using Canary releases. Right? And the reason why I put it up there, I knew the concept, I didn't know where the name Canary release came from. Right? In case people, maybe you know, I didn't know, so I want to explain it for those people that don't know. Canary was in the coal miners, they had the canary, they went down to the coal mines. If the bird survived, it was good enough for the coal miners to go down. If the bird died, the air quality was not good enough, so we'll rather wait than send people down. And the same concept goes for software engineering. So in their case, when they came up with new features, they released that feature only to people in New Zealand. Why New Zealand? That's why Hobbitland, right? New Zealand is English speaking, that they have enough people to be statistically significant on the feedback they get, and they tend to be very friendly. That means they don't go on Twitter and bitch about how bad the new Facebook feature is all the time, but they actually give constructive, positive feedback. Right? But Canary releases is a big thing that they do to get early feedback, and in case the New Zealanders like it, then the rest of the world will get to see it too. Right? Another cool thing what they do is called push karma. Push karma means every engineer that starts with Facebook, they assume engineers, they know what they do, right? They write good code, they write good tests, they deploy into production, everything will be fine. So we assume we're just allowed to do them everything. They get a push karma of 4 stars. In case a developer messes up and the deployment goes wrong and somebody's impacted, and the push karma goes down. What that means, the next time when a developer wants to push something into production, you have to either do more testing, more pair programming, more reviews. So the lower your karma, the harder it is for you to get something into production. But you start with the highest karma, and then you lose it, but you can gain it back. Right? And there's a lot of cool YouTube videos out there from their chief software architects that actually came up with the whole idea. And I thought, I found this picture really funny. Right? I looked for karma, and then may karma never bite you in the ass, and the other guy is karma. So some examples from what Facebook is doing. Another example is Verizon Enterprise. I work with them, and as you can see, sometimes we actually show up in lederhosen. But please I don't want to feed into the stereotype of Austrians, but it seems I'm actually doing. So I guess I don't need to explain who Verizon is. Verizon is a big company. The division I used to work with, or I'm working with, is Verizon Enterprise. They have a lot of different tools out there. What I thought was interesting, what they do, they have, I think, about 2,000 different legacy enterprise applications on different technologies. A lot of them are in Java. And they try to kind of DevOps'ify some of these applications. And what they do dojos. And what that means, they're picking individual monolithic applications, and they give them 6 weeks to take this application, bring it to the cloud, building a CI/CD pipeline, breaking the monolith into smaller pieces. I'm not necessarily talking about microservices, because microservice is not the answer to everything, but maybe just componentizing the code so it's easier and more independently testable. They are doing this not on their own, but with the help of external people that actually know and have done this before, know how to do it, with the goal to get it on the pipeline, to get it in the cloud, but more importantly in the end, developers take ownership at the end of the stuff they bring to the cloud.
Can we ask questions?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Go back a slide. We've got Fortify.
Yeah.
You see the same STLC for Facebook. Do you know?
So this is not the complete STLC. So this was a slide that we covered, that he gave me. We did a webinar where we talked about their DevOps transformation. This is by far not complete. I know you talked about earlier, you're a security guy.
Well,
that's why.
In Facebook's context,
yeah.
A lot of it was user testament functionality, not
yeah.
security.
Yeah.
Do they have?
Well, they have, I mean, all of these companies, right? It's not only developer go and release, there's a lot of stuff built into the pipeline, like, you know, static code analysis, security analysis. There's a lot of stuff built into the pipeline, and that's the reason why the pipeline is so important. Is the pipeline should automatically take care of a lot of the mistakes that people could potentially do. That's why we can automatically bake in unit testing, component testing, functional testing, static code analysis, dynamic code analysis, security checks. We can do penetration testing. All of this has to happen, in my perspective, automatically in the pipeline. And that's what I see in our industry. Now, me personally, as a performance engineer, as my background, performance engineering in the past used to be, I am part of the performance center of excellence, and every application that wants to go into production has to go through me. And sometimes I take a week to give you a report. That's gone. What I need to do as a performance engineer in 2017 is I need to figure out how I can automate the stuff that used to take me 2 weeks and build it into the pipeline. So that if you are a developer, you don't have to wait 2 weeks for me to give you performance feedback. It should take 5 minutes. So you get initial performance feedback. It should take you 5 minutes after code checking, you get feedback on whether you break any security rules. Okay? That's what pipelines are for. Automating a lot of the stupid manual things we used to do. Not stupid, but very basic. I mean, not sure what the right word is, but something we can automate, right? So, I like that. What they also did at Verizon, this is just a screenshot from one of the projects that they're using, JIRA. If you have paid any attention to what's happening in the DevOps world, then I'm sure Capital One was a company that came up. Capital One was one of the first financial companies that did a lot of stuff around DevOps, automating deployments. JIRA was their open source project because Capital One said, we started with 1, 2, 5 teams, but now we have 50, 100 teams that are having their pipelines and they're pushing code through, and we have no clue anymore, NFC anymore, what's actually going on. So we need something to visualize the quality of our different pipelines, the quality of pipelines of individual teams and multiple teams. And JIRA is, I think, one of the most popular, successful open source projects on GitHub to visualize work that is flowing through pipelines, right? And they are pulling in data from different tools along the pipeline. And Verizon was also using that, also pulling Dynatrace data, so monitoring data into the pipeline and stopping pipelines early in case there was any performance problems. One product we particularly talked about with Verizon, it was a large enterprise application that they had, huge revenue generator. Used to take them 30 days to deliver an update with an average of 5.79 bucks, so one of the metrics that they measured. And their goal was to speed up their delivery cycle, and most of the time when people kind of just speed up and automate stuff, I always say, bad code doesn't get better by just pushing it through, so you also have to invest in testing. In their case, with all the investment they did, they got faster, but also produced fewer bugs in the end. So they were speeding up, but also improving quality by getting earlier feedback, by automating all that stuff we just talked about. This makes sense? Okay. Is this information that is useful? Yeah? Okay, good. Another company, smaller in scale, Zico, a Belgian company, just to give you their size, 50 developers, 350 builds a day, 350 code changes, 90 builds a day, 749 automated test cases. They are building their pipeline using atlassian tools, Bamboo, using Selenium for functional tests, Sauce Labs for executing these tests on different OSs and browser combinations, and also Dynatrace for monitoring. So what they are doing, they said, if we already make the investment of writing unit tests and functional tests, what do we get? From a functional test, you get a functional red or green. That's great, but we can actually do much more. So what they are doing, for every test that they execute through Selenium, they are additionally capturing key metrics. For instance, how big is that page? How many JavaScript files are on there? How many database statements are executed when we execute the script? How many log messages are written? How much data do we transfer over the wire? How many exceptions are thrown? How many calls to an external service do we make? And if a developer, so they take all these metrics, and for every build, they are capturing these metrics, and if one of these metrics goes through the roof, basically some code change of a developer is all of a sudden making the number of bytes being transferred go from 1 megabyte to 5 megabytes, or adding 50 new JavaScript files, then functionally the test is still correct and the code, but something has significantly changed that needs the attention right away and not a month later when somebody actually does some performance analysis. Okay, so this is key thing, looking at these metrics. They also pull in that data back into Bamboo, so the performance feedback is automatically visible in the pipeline. And what they could do with changing the mentality and kind of getting this early feedback, as you can see, we're reducing response time of their key features by 43x, that's huge. They got rid of their out-of-memory exceptions, because one of the metrics that they're also tracking is how much memory is actually allocated on the heap for these features that they're automatically testing. And they also cranked down on sync and wait times that they had issues with in load testing environments. Another cool example is Mark Tomlinson. He's actually one of the guys that I learned a lot about over the last couple of years when it comes to performance engineering. He used to be the product manager for Load Runner at HP, then he went to Microsoft, now he's at PayPal. He calls himself a performance Sherpa, so he's a performance guru. I like this quote, and you can see sometimes we are a little crazy, but I like this quote, which is not crazy at all. And this quote actually comes from Jim Duggan, who used to work for Gartner, and remember, he's a performance engineer. And I guess you can read for yourself, but I like it. If you can impact the performance, or if you can impact the code before it is written, then and only then can you consider your work to be performance engineering. Otherwise, we're just doing testing. So coming back to me as a performance engineer, if at the end of the release cycle I give you a report that says this is how slow your stuff is and how much memory you use, and it takes me a month to get you that feedback on the code line you changed a month earlier, you have NFC, no fucking clue anymore what you actually changed. It doesn't change the way you are writing the next line of code. That's testing what we then do. So performance engineering means I need to give you feedback that influences how you write your next line of code. So you as Java developer, or whatever you're developing, whatever architect you are, you need to figure out how to get this type of feedback earlier. Okay? We have the tools. So what he's actually doing, what Mark is doing at PayPal, so he's an amazing performance engineer, but he says he's a one-man show. He cannot do all this stuff on his own. He needs to automate. And he said, here's what I'm doing. I'm providing continuous performance as a self-service for the developers. And the way he implemented it was what I thought was genius. So he has developers. His developers can open up a JIRA ticket. And in the JIRA ticket, the developers say, I want to have performance feedback on this Git pull request or this SVN revision. And on the JIRA ticket, he also references what type of performance feedback they want. Throughput, response time, memory consumption. They create the JIRA ticket. Then he uses a combination of rundeck to execute JMeter scripts to actually instrument that new code, and also Dynatrace for monitoring. And once this is all automated. So creating a JIRA ticket, then test cycle starts, and at the end of the test cycle, on the same JIRA ticket, he's posting back the performance results of JMeter, which is a load testing tool, and Dynatrace, which gives monitoring insight. So from a developer perspective, in order to get feedback, the only thing I have to do is open up a JIRA ticket. And maybe 15, 30 minutes or an hour later, on the same JIRA ticket, I get performance feedback. And I don't have to ask and knock on doors. Can you please run a performance test? So I think this is genius. And this is the way we need to think about, this is part of DevOps, right? It's about automation, getting feedback earlier. Another story from Century Insurance Company, Derek. So the reason why I put this story in, DevOps should be, at least when you look at the literature, it should be about blameless post-mortems, right? If you messed up deployment, we shouldn't just stone you and fire you, but we should be blameless. What they actually did, the other way around, they have a so-called bad app list. So they have a big monitor when you walk into the office, and it shows a list of applications with the highest failure rate over the last week, and those that are the slowest, with the slowest response time, right? And it's just like, it's not a blaming somebody, but it's more like a motivation. Your team, you don't want to be on that list, because then everybody knows that your application is slow or failing. In case, obviously they have monitoring, so they have the beautiful NOCs where they have all the dashboards up, but thanks to their improvement of DevOps, they often convert their NOC room into a game room and watching their favorite basketball teams. All right, so these are some stories. We have more in the second part of my presentation. I want to focus more about what we internally did, because we are also a Java-based company and how we transformed. But I have a couple of more things that I want to do to kind of round up what DevOps is for me. So I gave you my initial explanation of my photo camera. Remember that, right? That's the analogy. Then I gave you tips and tricks from Facebook, from Verizon, from Sofico, from PayPal, and now from Sentry. But there's more, and I think that's actually the biggest part, is cultural and personal changes that we all have to do. So the first thing that I often hear is, so if we do DevOps and if we follow the stuff that Werner Vogels, the CTO from Amazon, says, you build it, you run it, does this mean I'm all of a sudden a developer and I'm operations and I'm on call and I have to wake up in the middle of the night and my weekends are gone? So what does this mean? This is not the job that I was hired for. Right? If you are a developer, you're probably not hired for an operations job, or at least you probably don't get the money. So I believe, so the answers that I give, I think we need to understand that our jobs are changing in the DevOps world. We are no longer just coders that code from 9 to 5. I think most of us have never been, but in case we are, we should not think that way. In order to get into ops, you're not just thrown into ops, but I think you can learn it by doing, shadowing operations teams, rotating shifts. It doesn't mean you're always on call, but you want to rotate with your peers. Everyone is on call, including the CTO. That's a story from PagerDuty, which I like. Their CTO, he says, well, I'm part of the engineering team. I'm actually part of my company, right? So I'm equally responsible for making sure the system is running. So I'm also on call. And obviously, if you're changing the initial job description, then hopefully you guys all get some incentives. If you were hired for one job, but now the job has transformed over the years, then you want to figure out, how can you get, paying internet at home or whatever it is, parties. A lot of things that I learned is also from the guys from Capital One. Two different teams here. Adam Auerbach, he transformed the test automation. He moved on since, but these two guys I met in Toronto. And what I learned from them was pretty cool. So they also went from the traditional I'm a developer to I'm DevOps. And they had the problem that all of the development teams all of a sudden were completely overloaded with interceptions, right? There's a pager message going up here, a Slack channel, there's this and this going on, and they couldn't concentrate on work anymore. They actually referenced a study at their presentation that they did. It's called Deep Work. So it's scientifically proven that the average human person that works in an office environment, that we are interrupted about every 11 minutes. So the mean time between interruptions is 11 minutes. Right? We all know there's an email and text message and blah, blah, blah. But the problem is the average human brain needs 25 minutes to get back into that state of deep work. That's when code magically flows from your fingers. But if you're interrupted every 11 minutes, how can we ever get back to that state? That's why we constantly feel overloaded and never get anything done. So what they did to solve their problem, their development teams are typically around 8 people. And what they do, they divide these teams into a foreground and into a background team. So there's always 2 that are foreground and the other 6 that are background. That means if I'm looking at you, if you're a team plus the two, you are foreground, these are background. So if I want something from your team, I can only go to these 2. Next week it's the 2 of you. And in order to make this visible, they came up with a very simple solution. They just put LEDs on their desktops, showing green or red. So if I walk over, oh no, you're red, oh you're green, I can talk to you. And obviously this is not the only thing, they also put it into their Slack channels. And then I always know who can I interrupt and whom am I not supposed to interrupt. Right? It's a simple solution. Another thing that I liked, I think this is from Etsy. I'm sure you've worked in different companies, and I think that a big thing is always the mood of the company. There's some rumors going on, something is strange, but we don't really know, and we don't get stuff done because people are talking, right, and something is strange. So a simple solution at when you leave the office, just how was your day, right? Similar when we go to the airport and go through TSA or the toilet, was it good or bad experience? Even though maybe you sometimes have outliers and people just, press any button, you still get the sentiment of what the people within the company think right now, and you see a change, right? You see if people are having, something is wrong. And then instead of waiting for too long until everything blows up, you can react faster. Last example that I have is actually also that happened to me. So, we are an international company, so we have offices around the world. I'm sure you guys have been working with different companies around the world. If I just look into the room, we're all different nationalities, right? Mexican, we talked about this earlier, right? Oh, Venezuela, sorry, but you lived in Mexico, right? So sorry. Oh my God. So we are all from different places, different backgrounds. So here's what happened to me. This was earlier this year. You know me, Karolina. She's one of our product managers. She works out of our office in Gdansk, in Poland, right? So just to give you a little geographical lesson, it's all on the same continent. So you would assume, Austria and Poland is all the same thing, right? They're all over there. So they should be the same thing. Should be the same culture and everything. Well, here's what happened. In the summer months, I was asked to make myself more familiar about AWS. AWS, what it is, how we monitor, and then I asked my friends in Linz in Austria, because that's where I'm from, and I said, who can help me with AWS? And they said, well, go and ask Karolina. So I opened up my link. We're using Skype for Business internally, and I said, hey, Karolina, you can see the exclamation points and the uppercases, so this is, with the German background, it's very normal. It's not that we want to kind of shout, but this is just part, we do this all the time. Who could help me with a technical question on AWS? Well, she said, well, I think I can help you. What exactly do you need? Then we had a discussion, and everything was good. So I thought everything is perfectly fine. So 2 weeks later, open Red Hat Summit in Boston. She happened to be there. I live in Boston, so we meet. And then she takes me aside and tells me this. Could we finally meet face to face? I really thought you were in fill in the blanks. And I said, what just happened? I have NFC, what just happened? I thought we have a good relationship, right? But it's the first time I meet her face to face, but when we had this conversation, everything was good. So, in her mind, when we had this conversation, she is the technical product manager for AWS monitoring within Dynatrace. And I asked her, as a female employee, who could help me with the technical questions on AWS? So she assumed I'm a guy, and why? Obviously I could not assume that she is technical enough. And the way she read the question is that I'm just using her as a proxy to get to the real person. And that's why she thought, I am not the person I want to be. The thing though is, this is not what I had intended. I don't think I'm a sexist or anything like that. But I would have never known about this, wouldn't have we met face to face. So we would have always had a very strange, probably relationship, and I wouldn't have even known about it. The next time when I would have Skyped her, she probably wouldn't have responded immediately. And I'm sure this happens all the time and we are not aware of it. And one of the reasons is, because, and this comes not from me, but from some studies, 7% of communication is verbal, 55% is body language, and 38% is tone of voice. If we, and you said this earlier, you don't like remote working anymore, because you're missing all of this. And yes, we have Skype and we have Link, and this is great, and we have to use it, but we're still missing a very essential piece, which is the body language and that. Yeah? So, now why do we use this type of conversation? Because sometimes I observe, even though you sit in the same office, it's just easier to send an email or a text message. Why do we choose this type of communication? Because we're in control, right? You can edit things. It's, you can end the conversation at any point in time. It's very convenient if it goes into a direction you don't want to have it go. But I think we lose a lot of stuff by choosing these types of communications as well. Right? Because if I approach you with a question and I think where the direction is going, but then you come up with a completely new idea on how to solve the problem, and it only happens because I see you and how you react, this is stuff we lose. So that's why I kind of give recommendations. I mean, first of all, you get a job in San Diego, right? Hopefully somebody hires you. Also, we have these mediums, and if you are remote, really, I always force myself now to always use video. And actually it was our CTO, our founder, who started this. Every time he starts with video, it's like, okay, video, yeah. But it's just changes completely the conversation, right? So pick up the phone or video chat versus email. Managers lead by example, right? What I hate the most is if we are sitting in a meeting in a room and you're presenting something and the manager sits there with his always on the phone and they're just always watching something that don't pay attention and just being always distracted. Also design for conversations. I see a lot of things happening. I mean, obviously stand-up is nothing new anymore, but if you are, a lot of people are redesigning the workplace, building new offices with new concepts, right? Designing for conversations. And distributed teams, I believe that's very important, even though in our organization we have offices in Austria and in Poland. It's only 300 miles away. But it wouldn't have worked if we wouldn't have brought the people together from time to time. So what we actually did in the beginning, when we got this team on board, we were actually flying people for individual sprints from Austria to Poland and then from Poland to Austria. They had to work at least 1 or 2 sprints together face to face. Right? That totally changed everything. We didn't do this in the beginning and it was not a good thing, it was a disaster. Okay. So, to sum up my first part of the presentation, I believe DevOps. What is DevOps about? In the end, DevOps is about creating more value, making money faster, obviously for our companies, because we all work for companies, but very important, also making our lives easier. Right? The cultural changes, the personal changes, and let's leverage tools and technology and automation to not do the same boring manual things all the time. And don't be afraid of automating stuff that you're now so proud of doing manually all the time, right? Let's automate that and let's do something new. Okay? So, first part, let's take a quick break and then I want to focus a little bit what we do internally, focus on our story.